Something happened in China in 2025 that caught the whole world off guard. A factory there started making a brand new kind of battery. But here is the wild part. This battery does not use lithium at all. The main stuff inside it is something so common that you probably have a box of it in your kitchen right now. It costs about $1 per pound at the store. And yet this simple ingredient is powering a battery that does not catch fire, works in bitter cold, and can last almost 30 years of daily charging. The company behind it just landed the largest battery order anyone has ever seen. We are talking 60 gigawatt hours of capacity. To put that in perspective, that one deal is close to half of everything that company made in all of 2025 combined, across every type of battery they sell. Meanwhile, American battery companies spent 3 decades betting everything on lithium. They had every chance to explore this other option. They passed on it. They called it a hobby, not a real technology. Now they are watching the ground shift under their feet in just a few months, and they did not see it coming. If you like videos like this, please hit the like button because these take a ton of work to put together. And subscribe so you do not miss the next one. The story you are about to hear is about how China found a way around lithium while America was busy looking the other direction. The ingredient was hiding in plain sight the whole time, and the company that made it happen is one most Americans have never even heard of. But before we get to that company and that massive deal, you need to understand why lithium ruled the world for so long, and why nobody thought anything could ever take its place. How lithium took over everything. Think back to the early 1990s. Phones were the size of bricks. Laptops weighed as much as a bowling ball. A video camera battery gave you maybe 1 hour if you were lucky. The idea of a phone that fit in your pocket and lasted all day sounded like something from a movie. Nobody could squeeze enough energy into a small enough space without making the battery so heavy it was useless. Then, in 1991, a company in Japan called Sony released the first lithium battery for regular people to buy. The amount of energy packed into every pound of battery jumped to about 3 times what it was before. It happened almost overnight. Suddenly, things got smaller. Phones got smarter. Electric cars started to look like a real possibility instead of a crazy dream. The wireless earbuds people wear today, the thin laptops on every coffee shop table, the electric cars parked in driveways across America, and the power tools in garages everywhere, they all exist because of what Sony did that year. So why did lithium work so well? It comes down to 2 simple things. First, lithium atoms are super light. You can stuff millions of them into a tiny space without adding much weight. That is exactly what you need for something that goes inside a phone or a car. Second, lithium pushes a strong current. Each atom sends more power through the wire than almost any other element can. Light and powerful. That is the perfect recipe for a battery. For 30 years, the whole world chased lithium. Billions of dollars went into digging it out of the ground in places like Australia and Chile. Factories got bigger and bigger. Prices came down year after year. Electric cars could drive farther with each new model. It seemed like lithium was the answer to every energy question, and nobody was looking for a different answer. But here is what happens when an industry finds something that works really well. The people in charge stop asking if something better might be out there. In American battery labs, questioning lithium was like questioning gravity. Nobody wanted to hear it. The money was flowing. The factories were humming. The cars were selling. Why mess with a good thing? That mindset is exactly what set the stage for what happened next. Because while American companies were busy perfecting lithium, someone else was quietly working on a completely different idea, and that someone else was not in America. The cracks in the lithium story were already there. The fire problems were known, the cold weather problems were written down, the supply chain issues were easy to see coming, but the profits were too good and the momentum was too strong. Nobody wanted to rock the boat. So the industry kept going, and those cracks kept growing. To see how bad they got, you just need to look at what happened when lithium batteries met the real world in ways nobody planned for. The problems hiding inside every lithium battery. You might remember this story from 2016, even if you forgot the details. A company called Samsung made a phone called the Galaxy Note 7. Reviewers said it was the best phone ever. People lined up to buy it. Then, within weeks, phones started catching fire. On desks, in pockets, on airplanes while they were flying. In one scary case, a phone caught fire on a nightstand while the owner slept just 2 feet away. Samsung had to pull every single phone off the market. Airlines around the world banned them. The whole recall cost Samsung $5 billion. It was one of the most expensive product disasters ever. Most people blamed Samsung for making a bad phone. But here is the part the news did not talk about much. The fire risk was not just in that one phone. It was inside every lithium battery ever built. The liquid that carries energy through a lithium battery can burn. Not just a little, it can really catch fire if the battery gets too hot, gets a hole in it, or charges too fast. And it gets worse. When one cell catches fire, it heats up the cell next to it. That cell catches fire and heats up the next one. It spreads through the whole battery pack like a row of matches going off. It happens faster than any cooling system can stop it. Engineers call this thermal runaway. Everyone else just calls it a disaster. Then there is what cold weather does to lithium. When the temperature drops below freezing, the tiny charged pieces inside a lithium battery stop flowing the way they should. They start sticking to the inside walls of the battery like little metal needles. Every time you charge the battery, those needles get a little bigger. If they get big enough, they can short out the battery from the inside, which creates heat and starts the same fire problem we just talked about. Even when the needles never get that big, cold weather still ruins your range. At the freezing point, a lithium battery loses a big chunk of its promised distance. Not because anything broke, just because the air outside got cold. For someone driving an electric car in Minnesota in January, that can mean losing more than 100 miles of range on a morning when they need every mile they can get. Every electric car owner in a cold climate knows this secret. They talk about it in parking lots and online groups. The brochures never mention it, but winter shows the truth. These were not secret problems. Engineers had written about them for years. They built better cooling systems. They wrote smart software to manage the batteries. They even put heaters inside the packs to keep them warm. But none of that fixed the real issue. Lithium just does not work well in the cold. It never did. It never will. And between 2020 and 2022, the price of lithium itself went crazy. It jumped to 8 times what it cost before in just 24 months. Then in 2023, it crashed by 70% in 1 year. The industry had built the future of clean energy on something that changed price like a roller coaster. American companies kept pushing lithium anyway, but across the Pacific, someone was paying attention to those cracks, and they were about to do something about it. The answer had been sitting right under everyone's nose for 60 years. The battery ingredient America left behind. Here is something most people do not know. Long before lithium became the star of the battery world, scientists in the 1960s were looking at a totally different element. This element sits right below lithium on the periodic table. It acts in a lot of the same ways, and there is more of it in the ocean than almost anything else. You know it as table salt. The science word for the useful part of salt is sodium. The first rechargeable battery that packed a lot of energy was not a lithium battery, it was a sodium battery. Ford Motor Company built it in 1966. It was cool to watch in a lab, but it had one huge problem. It had to run at about 300 degrees Celsius. That is hot enough to melt lead. Nobody was going to put something that hot under the hood of a family car. so the idea sat there, interesting but useless in the real world. Then in 1972, a scientist named Stanley Whittingham figured out how to make a lithium battery work at normal room temperature. That one discovery changed everything. Lithium jumped ahead of sodium and never slowed down. When Sony started selling the first lithium batteries in 1991, the race was basically over. Over the next 30 years, more than $1 trillion went into lithium technology all around the world. Sodium got put on a shelf, not because someone proved it was worse, just because nobody wanted to spend the money to prove it could be better. But sodium had one problem that drove researchers crazy for 40 years. Sodium atoms are about 35% bigger than lithium atoms. Inside a battery, atoms have to slide in and out of a storage material over and over without breaking it. Lithium fits perfectly between the layers of graphite, which is the stuff inside your pencil. The fit is so good that lithium can go in and out almost forever without wearing anything down. Sodium atoms were just too big. Every time one tried to squeeze into graphite, it cracked the structure apart. After a few hundred charges, the battery was dead. The energy was there. The chemistry worked. But the storage material could not handle the size of the atoms. That one problem shut down sodium battery research for 40 straight years. American companies looked at it and said, no thanks. They had lithium working, and lithium was making them money. Why risk billions on salt? But not everyone felt that way. A small team in Canada found something in the year 2000 that would eventually change the whole story. There was no big announcement, no headlines, just a quiet discovery in a quiet lab. It would sit there for another 20 years before the right company came along, picked it up, and decided to spend the money that nobody in America was willing to spend. That company was not in Detroit or Silicon Valley. It was in China, and it was about to do something the whole battery industry said could not be done. The discovery that changed everything. Let us go back to that Canadian lab in the year 2000. A team was working with a material called hard carbon. Hard carbon is made by heating up plant waste and similar stuff to super high temperatures in sealed containers with no oxygen. It sounds fancy, but what comes out looks nothing like the neat, tidy graphite in a pencil. Graphite has clean layers stacked up like a deck of cards. Hard carbon is a jumbled mess. It has pockets and gaps of all different sizes scattered everywhere. Under a microscope, it looks like someone shook a box of carbon atoms and they froze in place. It is messy. It is random. It does not look useful for anything precise, let alone a battery. But here is where the accident turns into history. Those messy pockets happen to be just the right size to hold sodium atoms. Sodium can slide in and out of hard carbon thousands of times without breaking anything because there is no neat structure to break. The atoms just drop into whatever pocket fits them. When the battery gives out power, they slide right back out. It is that simple. The problem that had stumped the smartest battery researchers for 40 years suddenly had an answer. And the answer had been sitting in that lab the whole time. It was not a new element. It was not a new idea. It was just a different kind of carbon that nobody had tried with sodium until this team gave it a shot. But there was a catch, and it was a big one. Hard carbon soaks up moisture like a sponge. The same messy structure that makes it good at holding sodium also makes it grab water. Even a tiny bit of water inside a battery reacts with the liquid in there and creates gases that ruin the cell from the inside out. In a lab, with small batches and careful handling, you can keep things dry enough. But in a factory making thousands of batteries a day for cars and power grids, this was a totally different problem. You cannot guarantee that every single battery comes out perfectly dry. The risk was too big. The cost of getting it wrong was too high, and the money needed to solve it was more than any university or small company could handle. So for 20 years, the discovery just sat there. American labs wrote papers about it. Japanese companies did small tests. European schools asked for grants. Everyone thought the science was interesting. Nobody wanted to put down the billions of dollars needed to turn it into a real product. The potential was obvious to anyone who read the research. But potential does not build factories. Potential does not put batteries in cars. What was needed was a company with deep pockets and a willingness to take a risk that everyone else had passed on. American companies had the money. They chose not to use it. They stuck with lithium because it felt safe. But one company in China was about to look at the same research, see the same potential, and make a bet that would leave the entire American battery industry speechless. How a Chinese company quietly won. The company is called CATL. The full name is Contemporary Amperex Technology Company Limited. They are based in Fujian, China. They are the biggest battery maker on the planet by a wide margin. But if you stopped people on the street in any American city and asked them about CATL, most of them would have no idea what you were talking about. Around 2015, CATL made a choice that looked completely crazy to anyone watching from the outside. They decided to spend about $1.5 billion over 10 years to solve the hard carbon problem. American battery companies were putting their money into lithium, building bigger factories, and making lithium cheaper. CATL was putting money into something the rest of the world had laughed off as a science fair project. Then they started solving problems one by one, and the details that came out later surprised everyone. Their first big fix was changing the surface of the hard carbon so it would push water away instead of pulling it in. The parts of the material that naturally soaked up moisture were changed so they would act more like a raincoat, letting water roll right off. Their second fix was controlling the size of the tiny pockets inside the hard carbon with incredible precision. Pockets that were too small could not hold enough sodium to store good energy. Pockets that were too big wasted space. Getting the size exactly right, over and over, across millions of batteries, took years of work and money that nobody else was willing to risk. The result is a battery CATL calls the Nextra. What it does has surprised even people who have been watching this story for years. In a real electric car, the Nextra gives you over 310 miles of range on a single charge. You can get an 80% charge in just 15 minutes. These are not numbers from a test bench. This is a battery that is being made in large numbers and shipped to real customers right now. The lifespan is something else entirely. The Nextra can go through more than 10,000 full charge cycles before it starts to slow down. That is about 3 times longer than the lithium batteries it is competing against. If you charge this battery once every single day, it would still work after 27 years. By the time the battery wears out, the car around it will probably have been recycled twice. And then there is the cold weather performance. This is where sodium goes from impressive to just plain embarrassing for lithium. The liquid inside the Nextra stays fluid at temperatures as low as -58 degrees Celsius. That is colder than the coldest temperature ever recorded in mainland Alaska. At -40 degrees Celsius, the battery still holds 90% of its full charge. Read that number again, 90%, in weather that would make a lithium battery almost useless. For people who drive electric cars in cold places, this is not a small upgrade. This is the difference between a car that works all winter and a car that sits there doing nothing for 4 months. And then there is the price. This might be the most important number in the whole story. CATL is making sodium cells for about $19 per kilowatt hour. Lithium cells cost between 55 times and $70 per kilowatt hour. That is not a small difference. That is a battery that costs about 3 times less, being made right now, at full scale, for real customers. This is the battery that landed that 60 gigawatt hour deal, and this is why American companies are now scrambling to figure out what just happened. Why America missed the boat. Here is the honest reason America lost this race, and it is more uncomfortable than most business leaders want to admit out loud. The problems with lithium were not a secret. They were written down in research papers for decades. Engineers knew about the fire risk back in 2005. They knew about the cold weather problem by 2010. They could see the supply chain risks by 2015. All of it was out in the open, published, and available to anyone who wanted to look. But when a technology is working well enough and the money is coming in, whole industries fall into a very human trap. They stop looking for something better. Change needs a reason, and that reason has to be stronger than the comfort of keeping things the way they are. American battery companies had that reason right in front of them for 20 years. They chose comfort, they picked the technology they already knew, the factories they had already built, and the profits they were already collecting. Chinese battery companies made a different choice. They read the same papers. They saw the same potential. They decided to spend the money and put in the time to turn that potential into something real. Now that harder path has become the winning path, and America is trying to catch up in a technology it could have led from the start. The sodium battery did not come out of nowhere. It sat in labs and research papers for more than 20 years, waiting for the moment when the world would finally pay attention. That moment came because lithium made it come. Lithium got too expensive. It was too risky with the fires. It was too controlled by a small number of countries. All of that pushed the industry to finally look at the alternative that had been sitting on the periodic table the whole time. For American car companies trying to make affordable electric vehicles, this is really tough news. Chinese electric cars with sodium batteries can be priced lower than American companies can match with lithium. The gap in raw material cost is just too big. You cannot design your way around a 3 times difference in what the basic stuff costs. For American power grids being built with billions of taxpayer dollars, the news is just as hard. Those grids are being built with lithium batteries that Chinese factories are already moving past. The storage systems going online today will use batteries that cost more, do not last as long, and carry fire risks that sodium batteries simply do not have. The future of energy was hiding in your salt shaker the whole time. China figured it out first. They spent the money. They solved the problems. They built the factories. America is now in the position of a country that watched a whole new industrial revolution begin and stayed home reading the newspaper. The lithium era is not over yet, but for the first time in 30 years, the world has a real alternative, and it is not controlled by American companies. That 60 gigawatt-hour deal in 2025 was not just a contract. It was a sign that the map of global energy just got redrawn, and the new center is not where anyone in Detroit or Silicon Valley thought it would be. If you like this story and want to keep seeing more like it, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. There are more videos on the screen right now if you want to keep going. So here is a question for you. If a sodium-powered electric car cost half the price of a lithium one and worked better in winter, would you buy it? Tell me in the comments.